Okay, so I think we'll get started for today, and I want to say good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for joining us. We do have an exciting presentation planned today, and it's about heart-healthy ways of eating. My name is Veronica, and I'm a registered dietitian. I'm co-presenting today with my registered dietitian colleague, Fatim. We both work at the Toronto Rehabilitation Institute Cardiac Rehab program at the University Health Network. Today, we plan to discuss heart-healthy eating patterns, and we also plan to discuss ideas for eating more plant-based meals, as well as provide some healthy eating tips for those individuals participating in Ramadan. Finally, we will walk you through how to fill out something called the Mediterranean Diet Score tool, which is used to assess your current eating pattern to the Mediterranean eating pattern to see how you're doing. And from this tool, we'll encourage you to choose an area to work on to increase your own adherence to a heart-healthy way of eating. Now, if you've watched webinars, our webinars before, we do have ground rules, and these include that the session is for education only. We do encourage you to connect with your own registered dietitian or healthcare professional for specific advice about your situation. And, the presentation is about 30 minutes long, leaving 15 minutes to answer your questions at the end. And if we don't have enough time to answer your questions, please link back to our website, because we will have written answers there to all of the submitted questions. As you know, we are using Zoom to conduct this meeting. And if you hover your mouse at the lower part of the screen, if you haven't done so already, you can see that there is a Q&A icon. And you can use that box to submit any questions that you have for us anytime during the session today. We're also going to try to use the chat icon as well today. So that is located right next to the Q&A icon, and we do encourage your participation. So I hope that you feel comfortable using that as well. We're going to start the session off with actually watching a video about the Mediterranean eating pattern. So has anyone heard of the Mediterranean eating pattern before? There is very, very good evidence that this eating pattern can prevent primary and secondary heart disease, but it can also help control some of those heart disease risk factors, like lowering our blood pressure, our blood sugar, our blood cholesterol, and also prevents certain types of cancers. So this video that I'm going to show you is actually on our website. So I'm going to try to link to that now, if I can, and I'll show you where it is. So hope everyone can see that. This is our website, cardiaccollege.ca. So what you're going to do is you're going to jump to the Thrive 12-week challenge, and there's 12 videos located here. And we're going to choose the Eat the Mediterranean Way video. So I click that, and then we'll just start here. So if you ever want to, watch it again or share it with friends or family, feel free to do that.
You can get many powerful health benefits from choosing to eat in the traditional way of people living around the Mediterranean Sea. Their lifestyle includes eating food that benefits their heart health by lowering blood pressure, blood cholesterol, and blood sugar. It also uses meals as a way to spend time with others. This weekly challenge will share small changes you can make to start eating the Mediterranean way. Eating the Mediterranean way starts with eating more plant foods, fresh and colorful vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, nuts and seeds. Extra virgin olive oil and fish are a big part of this way of eating. People in this region love to season their food with lots of onion, garlic, and tomato too. The great thing about this traditional approach is that it focuses on eating more delicious food, which makes it a pattern of eating that is easier to maintain. More fruits and vegetables of all types. More whole grains like brown rice and quinoa. More legumes like beans, lentils, and chickpeas. More nuts and seeds like walnuts and pumpkin seeds, more fish and seafood, more healthy dairy and dairy alternative choices, like lower fat cheese and yogurt. Lots of seasoning with spices, tomato, onion, and garlic instead of salt. The easiest way to try eating the Mediterranean way is to focus on fresh, whole foods. That means buying most of your foods from the outside edges of the grocery store. Fresh vegetables are a good place to start. They're usually found along the outside edge of the grocery store. You might choose some spinach, broccoli, and eggplants. Don't forget the tomatoes, onion, and garlic. How about some fresh fruit for dessert and snacks? You can also find lean meats like chicken and fish along the outside edges of the store. Fresh, frozen, take your pick. All of these choices can fit into your Mediterranean meals. Next, where are the eggs? Milk and yogurt? Look for some healthy dairy choices to put into your cart. Finally, find the aisle that has whole grains, legumes, and extra virgin olive oil. These foods are just as important as the fresh foods you put into your cart. When you shop along the outside edges of the grocery store, it means you're buying more whole foods packed with healthy nutrients and less processed, canned, and boxed foods. This way of eating is based on way more than just food choices. It celebrates home cooking and enjoying the flavors, smells, colors, and textures of whole foods while spending time with others. There are countless recipes that fit this way of eating, and you can adapt it to your cultural way of eating. Are you ready to try a new way of eating that can lower your blood pressure, cholesterol, and blood sugar? Do you want to lower your chance of developing health problems like diabetes, heart disease, and stroke, or having another heart attack? Eating the Mediterranean way can help you do this. What is one change you can try this week? You might start by shopping along the outside edges of the grocery store to find fresh, whole foods. If you're ready, try making one meal a day at home using those ingredients. As with any change, take it slow. Give yourself time to make these changes to your way of eating. Remember, a small change to eat healthy is a big step closer to better health.
Okay, so we're back, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Now, what did you learn from watching this video? And this is where I would encourage you to try the chat function at the bottom of your screen. If you can, think about a couple things that you learned or that stood out maybe from the video, and just write them down in the chat box. That would be fantastic. So I don't see any messages yet, but we are trying to increase engagement from the audience, and this would be a nice way to do so. Great, I'm seeing some responses now. So I see pumpkin seeds was emphasized in the video, as well as shopping on the outside of the aisles, right? So in the grocery store, it was mentioned to include more whole foods, and that would be found on the outside aisles of the grocery store, so that's great. There was no mention of pasta or white flour foods, and that's correct. I will present the Mediterranean pyramid in a second, and I'll show you where that would fit. And then lots of fruits and vegetables, eating more whole grains, and other foods that were emphasized was olive oil and salmon. Great, that's fantastic. Thank you for contributing today. And someone else has mentioned, I already shop like that, so that's fantastic, and keep doing it is all I can say. So we'll jump now to what that Mediterranean eating pattern looks like. And this is it. It is a pyramid. And just like you said, it does include a lot of foods from plants. So that would be eating fruits and vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds more often. And you can see that makes up, the base of the pyramid there. Instead of meat, it emphasized eating fish and legumes more often. So legumes being, our beans, chickpeas, lentils, as well as our soy protein. And it also talked about choosing the healthy fats like olive oil and nuts and seeds regularly. There's also some mention about garlic, adding garlic, onion, and tomato instead of sodium to season your food. And one of the big parts of, this pyramid that you can see, the base of this pyramid is actually, not even talking about what to eat, but how we can eat it. And, it did suggest it suggested cooking at home more often and sharing our meals together, as well as including some physical activity there too. So again, thank you for contributing to that chat. That was great. I do want to say that there is no one right way to, eat the Mediterranean way, but you want to try to aim for choose more foods that are plant-based. So that would make up the bottom of your pyramid. And as you can see there, the plant-based foods are things like whole grains. So that would be your whole grain bread instead of the white flour like that was mentioned. That's why white flour wasn't mentioned in the video, because it's not necessarily a whole grain. It's not giving us a lot of fiber or vitamins and minerals. So we do want to emphasize more whole grains. And, pasta definitely can be included. I do think it's there in the pyramid. But as we know, Italians love their pasta and they're part of the Mediterranean pattern of eating as well. So it can be included, but we do want to choose whole grains most often. So why are we talking about the Mediterranean eating pattern? And as you can see at the bottom there is a lot of research and evidence that suggests that eating the Mediterranean way can actually lower our risk from dying from heart causes by 50 to 70%. Now that's a pretty significant statistic. And that is why we do feature it here. And as I said, there's not one right way to do this. So there's other eating patterns that are recommended. And the one that I have presented here is called the vegetarian and vegan diet pyramid. And, it does have some similarities and benefits to the Mediterranean plan. It emphasizes how to eat. So at the bottom there, it talks about sharing foods with others, cooking at home more often, including physical activity. But as it is a vegetarian or vegan pyramid, it is very low in animal foods and really focuses on eating foods from plants, just like that Mediterranean eating pattern. Now I have one other eating pattern here. I can bring it up, and it's called the DASH diet pyramid. Hopefully you've heard of the DASH before, but if you haven't, DASH stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension. And so this eating pattern was actually developed to help reduce blood pressure. And it's been studied to show many other benefits, as well as the reduction of blood pressure, but also our cholesterol levels. And it does so by focusing on specific minerals, like including enough potassium, magnesium, and calcium, and reducing the mineral sodium to give the benefits of the reduction of the blood pressure. So it's not just reducing sodium, but increasing those other minerals as well. And to do that, eating more plant foods, eating more fish and plant-based proteins, including oils, as well as low-fat dairy products. So let's try this chat function again. If you can, I did mention some similarities as I went through, but if you can just explain, or if you can contribute, I guess, to say if there's any similarities that pop up to you, or any differences that stand out. You can start now. Oh, there's a question in the chat box. Would baked beans be included with beans? Definitely could be included. If baked beans are in a can, we do want to make sure that it is a low sodium choice, but definitely baked beans. Beans are a plant-based protein, so definitely could be included. Great. Nuts and seeds, low-fat dairy are all similarities in the three patterns, so that's great. Anything else? Oh, another question about what kind of nuts, and a variety of nuts. So if you look at the patterns, you could see that there are many nuts. You know, in the vegan vegetarian pyramid, there's a whole row of just different types of nuts. You know, different nuts gives us different vitamins and minerals. You know, almonds are rich in calcium and walnuts are rich in omega-3. So a variety is always something that we recommend. There is an importance of eating our fruits and vegetables on a daily basis, absolutely, and a lot less red meat, pork, and sodium. So that's fantastic. Thank you again for contributing to that. So hopefully this emphasizes that the bottom line is that there's no right way to do this, but it's more of a guideline, and the best dietary pattern for you is one that you can see yourself following for the long term. So you need to think about what you can really do for the rest of your life. What are your everyday foods and activities that would make up the base of your pyramid? And hopefully that does include, you know, plants, whole grains, olive oil, and then the foods closer to the top should be chosen less often. So think about perhaps what that looks like for you. So we have 4 pictures on the screen now, and all of these foods were you know, mentioned in all of the 3 eating patterns. What do they have in common? So if you have time, you could put that in the chat box. Colorful, great. Oh, and I do see some questions in the chat. If you can put them in the Q&A, I'll be sure to address them at the end. Fatim and I will be able to do that. But right now, let's just look at these pictures if we can to see what they have in common. So colorful, and I also see someone commented grains and fiber. Awesome. And that's absolutely right. Not processed, exactly. And there's a variety. Absolutely. So all of these foods are whole foods, right? And it is recommended in all 3 eating patterns that we are choosing more foods that are coming from plants and that they are whole foods. And that's because they're not processed, which means that they're naturally going to be low in sodium, they're naturally low in sugars, as well as high in fiber. So that's great. And then one other slide with 4 different pictures. What do these pictures have in common? Eating with others, absolutely. Yeah, eating with friends, eating with family, no TV, no distractions, absolutely. And eating as a family, exactly. So thank you for contributing there. And that's what we want to emphasize. And it did, you know, in the Mediterranean eating pattern, as well as the vegan and vegetarian pattern, it's actually included there to try to cook at home more often and try to have some quality time together and do so over food. You know, sharing traditions around food can help pass on you know, generations of learnings to each other, as well as teaching each other different ways of cooking at home. And it also models healthy eating behaviors for other family members and as well as children. So if you're not doing this already, I do encourage you to try it out. And just when you are eating with others, it will help to try to increase our mindfulness too of what we're eating, and perhaps be able to slow down and tune into our feelings of, you know, satiety and fullness. It can also be a chance to connect with others and share, and just this sense of community has been shown to reduce our stress. And I know eating together can be done in many ways, but right now we don't have a lot of options. You know, restaurants are closed and we can't see extended family and friends. But I know I tried doing a video chat, on the Easter weekend with my family, and it was actually a lot more fun than expected. It provided a great opportunity to share and connect, and it did so over an activity that helped us appreciate our food and our situation. So if you haven't tried it, maybe it's something you could do while we're isolated at home. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Fatim to discuss how to assess our current eating pattern using the Mediterranean Diet Score tool.
Okay, thank you so much, Veronica. That was great information. So now that we've seen some of the heart healthy eating patterns that exist, it's time to assess our own eating. So as Veronica mentioned, the Mediterranean Diet Score tool is something you can use. It's available on the Cardiac College website under the Eat Healthy section. It's a very easy to fill out questionnaire. It gives you 13 yes or no questions about your eating habits. Completing the tool will help you to understand how close your current eating habits are to the Mediterranean way of eating. So you'll be able to identify areas you can work on and small changes you can make. Once you complete the tool, you can also save it and print it out, and it will give you some tips on changes you can make. And the answers and information is just for your use. It's not saved on the system, so it's just for your own use. And I think that the thing to remember is that every small change can add up. I know it's a stressful time for a lot of us with the COVID-19 situation. Maybe our eating is not as ideal as we'd like it to be, but making small changes does add up. And in terms of the Mediterranean Diet Score tool, the research shows that for every 2-point score increase, you can reduce your risk for cardiovascular disease by up to 10%. So again, that's pretty impressive. Once you've completed the tool, if you do want more help or guidance to make diet changes, you can look at other sections in the Eat Healthy section of the website, or you can consult with a registered dietitian. And then also next Wednesday, we'll have another Zoom session that will cover more in detail the different types of foods that make up the Mediterranean diet plan, how much to include, and why we need to include these. So lots of good information coming up. Okay, so let's take a moment and practice some heart healthy eating. So here we have a meal, meat and potatoes, and maybe if you can share in the chat box, what would you add or change to this meal to make it more heart healthy? And I'll give you a minute to maybe type in your suggestions in the chat box. Okay, so some good suggestions coming up. Changing the red meat to fish or chicken is a great idea. Changing to salmon we have. Maybe changing that mashed potato to a baked potato or sweet potato. That's an excellent suggestion. So with the baked potato, you leave the skin on and you get a lot of the fiber. And in the sweet potato, there's fiber also in the flesh. So also a great choice. And then lots of suggestions about including more colorful vegetables. I love that. So this plate is actually missing vegetables. And if you've listened into our past presentations, you know that ideally we do want to fill half our plate with colorful fruits and vegetables. So that would be a great addition to this meal. Also, if we look at the portion sizes, when we think of that half plate of fruits and veggies, we want to keep our protein or our meat portion to about a quarter plate, and then our grains and starches to about a quarter plate as well. So all excellent suggestions. Great work, everyone, and thank you for participating. Now, one of the things that's been mentioned is including more plant foods in our diet. And eating a more plant-based diet doesn't mean that you have to give up all your meat, but it does mean that you're going to think about making plants the base for your meals and try to incorporate some meatless meals into your week. This is completely in line with the Mediterranean diet, the vegetarian diet, and also the DASH diet. And so when we're switching to more of a plant-based diet, we want to make sure that we're getting enough protein. And it's actually quite easy to get enough protein to meet our body's needs from plant sources. So for example, we can start using more legumes like beans or lentils or chickpeas. You might start small and maybe make your own hummus. And there's an excellent recipe video on the Cardiac College website if you haven't made it before. You can maybe try adding lentils or beans to a soup. If you're having a salad, you might just open up a can of beans or chickpeas and toss those into your salad for a great protein source that will also give you a little boost of fiber as well. Soy products like tofu and tempeh are also great choices. So with tofu, it's pretty bland on its own, but it's like a sponge and it'll absorb the flavor that you add to it. So you can try something like a soft or silken tofu in a smoothie, or maybe cut up some firm tofu and add it to a stir fry or a curry. And then add all your spices to give it some flavor. I don't know if anyone has tried tempeh, but it's getting to be pretty widely available in the grocery store. It's a fermented soy or lentil product, so that gives it more of a meatier texture, a little bit of a nutty taste, and it's quite delicious as a meat substitute as well. You can try nuts or nut butters, and I noticed in the question box there was a question about nuts. You do want to stick to unsalted nuts, but you can choose a variety. And including a handful of nuts as a snack a few days a week is a great way to add in a healthy protein. You can use nut butters. Again, a natural almond butter or a peanut butter would also be a great way to add protein to your meals. And then lastly, quinoa is a great choice as well. So quinoa is a whole grain, but it's also higher in protein than other grains. So you might try that instead of something like rice or white pasta as a side dish. So a question came in, where can you find tempeh? So you'll find tempeh in the grocery store in the produce aisle, and it'll be right next to the tofu and the meatless products. So you'll see it either in the produce aisle or close to it, maybe next in the deli aisle, but it's quite widely available. I've seen it in most of our grocery stores like Loblaws or Metro or Longo's, they all carry it. Okay, so some resources to get you started on eating more of these meatless meals. So as mentioned, the Cardiac College website has some recipe videos. You can also find tips on buying, storing, and cooking legumes. There are short videos and tip cards on buying things like canned or dried legumes in the grocery store, as well as how to choose a healthy soy product. So you'll find those all under the Eat Healthy section. If you go to pulsecanada.com or lentils.org, there are some great recipes on using legumes, from everything to dips, to salads, to main dishes, and even desserts. And in fact, Veronica and I have made some pretty tasty muffins and brownies using lentils and black beans. So you can get very creative and incorporate these into your diet. So a little bit of homework for this session. So perhaps when we've finished our webinar, you can go on to the Cardiac College website and fill out that Mediterranean diet score tool. Shouldn't take you more than a couple of minutes. And then based on your results, maybe you can make an action plan and see what areas you can change or maybe add some foods to or cut back on certain things. And again, next week's session will also help you with tips on making action plans. You can also read the Eating Well for a Healthy Heart booklet. For those of you who are patients in our program, you might have purchased this book. And for those of you who don't have it, you can actually download a copy on the Cardiac College website. And this is actually available in a few different languages. So quite a useful resource to have. Okay, I'd like to end off today by talking a little bit about healthy eating in Ramadan, which starts on Friday. It's a month where Muslims fast during daylight hours, and they also work on things like self-improvement and worship. It's traditionally a month that's filled with lots of family gatherings and gatherings with friends to break your fast. This year, unfortunately, it will be a little different with the COVID-19 situation, as we'll only be celebrating and eating with our own family at home. But I want to just share some tips to keep in mind as you go through the month. Firstly, you always want to consult with your doctor, especially if you're living with heart disease or diabetes, to make sure that fasting is safe for you. Every individual's condition is unique, and you want to make sure that you've discussed things like your medication timing and your fluid requirements, and make sure that fasting is something that would be okay for you to go ahead and do. We're not into very hot weather yet, but our days are still quite long. So I think hydration is very important when you're fasting. So you want to make sure you have lots of fluids when you break your fast and also in your morning meal. So making sure that you're taking adequate fluid is important. And then oftentimes in Ramadan, we have traditional foods and special foods that we only eat during this month. And it's okay to include these, but I think overall we want to try to stick to our normal healthy eating pattern. And as Veronica has mentioned in our past sessions, it's always a great idea to make a weekly menu. It'll also help you to have the groceries that you need on hand. I know a lot of us are not shopping very often, or we're ordering our groceries or having others help us with these groceries. So having that weekly plan, especially during this month, will be very helpful. Now, if we talk about the two meals during fasting, probably the most important one is actually the pre-dawn meal, or suhoor. And it's especially important to include this meal and not to skip it. You want to make sure to include at least 2 to 3 cups of fluids. And this can be water, it can be herbal or decaf tea, milk, or a smoothie. You might also want to include some hydrating fruits such as melons or oranges or berries or grapes. These are all great ways to keep hydrated. You also want to sustain your energy levels throughout the day. So at sahur, it's really important to include whole grains and also some protein to keep you going. And you might try things like an oat or a barley porridge. You might make up a batch of overnight oats, or just keep it simple. And you might have something like just a whole grain toast with nut butter, or maybe some hummus and pita. I always find that it's very challenging to wake up so early and prepare a meal. So having things ready the night before, maybe keeping your smoothie ingredients ready, or having that batch of oatmeal that's cooked and ready to reheat, or having some overnight oats ready to go, just makes it that much easier to eat a healthy meal that early in the morning. At iftar, or your meal when you break your fast, it's always a great idea to start with a date. It's a quick burst of energy and minerals that your body does need after a long day of fasting. And then after that, you want to have something to drink. And then think back to that plate method when you're planning your meal. So again, that half plate of fruits and vegetables, a quarter plate of protein, and then a quarter plate of your whole grains to make that complete meal. As I mentioned, there are often deep fried foods or sweet treats that make Ramadan special. And it's absolutely fine to enjoy these once in a while, but just be mindful of your portions and make sure those foods aren't replacing some of the healthy foods on your plate. So for those of you who are observing Ramadan, I'd like to wish you a happy and healthy month, and hopefully it'll all go well. And To everyone else, thanks so much for listening in today. If you have any questions, please type them into the Q&A box at the bottom, and Veronica and I will do our best to answer them right now.
Great, thank you, Fatim. It does look like we have lots of questions, so we'll start to go through them. I do want to just say that next Wednesday we do have another heart-specific, heart healthy eating specific presentation that we'll be giving, and it will provide a lot more specifics about different foods and serving sizes at that time, but we'll definitely answer the questions that are coming in now. But I guess it's just a plug for next week to stay tuned.
Yeah.
I guess I could start. So I'm seeing a question here: is almond milk good for us? And absolutely, plant-based milk options like almond milk is a good option. And when we compare it to something like cow's milk, it is fortified with calcium and vitamin D, so it's equal to cow's milk that way, but it is lower in protein. So you think almonds are a good source of protein, but the commercial varieties of almond milk have about 1 to 5 almonds per cup. So it doesn't provide a significant source of protein. So that would be what's missing in the almond milk. The other point I would like to make for almond milk is just to make sure that you're choosing the unsweetened versions, just to make sure that you're not, doubling the amount of sugar that you do find in milk.
Great, thanks, Veronica. So there's another question that's come up. How would the Mediterranean diet change with both lactose and gluten sensitivities? So great question. So it is quite an adaptable diet. So you can adapt it to your personal needs and your culture as well. If you are lactose intolerant, you might try lactose-free milk, or maybe think of a soy beverage as a substitute for regular dairy. And if you have gluten sensitivities, you might be avoiding wheat, but there are many other whole grains that you can include. So you might try something like quinoa or a whole grain brown rice as a substitute for the wheat. But you can definitely still follow the overall Mediterranean diet eating pattern when you do have food sensitivities.
Great. And another question I'm seeing here is again about almond milk, but there's a second question to it, and it says, what about sea salt? So sea salt is actually very similar in the amount of sodium to table salt. So it, sometimes is marketed as healthier because it has some more nutrients in it compared to the table salt. But we would have to consume a lot of the sea salt to actually get those nutrients, and that's not something that we recommend. And it isn't actually lower in the sodium, and we do know that too much sodium can increase our blood pressure. So, salt is salt. Even the pink salt that's out on the market too is very similar in the amount of sodium. So all the salts across the board are similar, and the general message is to watch how much we're using. And again, that message of choosing whole foods that are unprocessed will help to make sure that we are on a lower sodium eating pattern.
Okay, great. So a couple of questions that have been coming in about nuts. So what is the benefit of eating mixed nuts? And nuts are high in calories. Don't you have to be careful about how much you eat? So I'll answer the first one. So nuts are great. We know they're a great source of plant protein. They're also a very good source of fiber, and they also contain phytonutrients and antioxidants. They're high in a lot of minerals like potassium and magnesium. So lots of benefits in terms of keeping you full, regulating your blood sugars and your blood pressure. We know they also have some benefit in terms of decreasing inflammation in our body. So a great thing to include if you can tolerate nuts. And so as I had mentioned, a handful is what we're recommending. So a small handful or about a quarter cup is a portion size. And if you're looking at nut butters, it would be 1 to 2 tablespoons. So they're definitely great. they are quite a concentrated source of fat and calories. So you do want to be mindful of your portion size, but for most of us, a quarter cup a day is absolutely something that we can incorporate.
Great, thank you. And there's a question here about finding low-fat yogurt is easy, but low-fat cheeses that taste good is a challenge. And that is true. You know, when they do remove the fat in cheese, it does alter the texture as well as the flavor. But softer cheeses, I guess, like goat and ricotta, are lower in fat than harder cheeses. So you can think about it that way. And try to buy those ones. You know, the harder cheeses like cheddar or mozzarella, you would want to look for that percent MF in the corner of the package. So that's percent milk fat, and we want to aim for 15% or less. And Fatim mentioned on our website, cardiaccollege.ca, we do have a video about how to choose a healthier cheese, and it's very short. It's about 2 or 3 minutes long. So I would encourage you to link back to our website and check that out. And it goes into more specifics about, you know, how you can find these cheeses in the grocery store. Sometimes, you know, they're not in the section with the milk and the regular fat cheeses. Perhaps they're actually found in the beginning of the grocery store with the produce. Sometimes they have some cheeses in that section. So I encourage you to look back at that video to see if you can, gives you some more information.
Okay, there's a question here about how about preparation? We've started using an air fryer that requires a coating with olive oil. And that's a great way to cook, actually. So we do encourage things like grilling or broiling or baking rather than deep frying. But the Mediterranean diet doesn't, you know, it's not a low-fat diet, and it's not eliminating oils. It does encourage the use of olive oil. So if you're using olive oil, you know, to coat your food before you put it in the air fryer or you bake with it, that's perfectly fine. And if you do get a chance to do the Mediterranean diet score tool, you'll notice that, you know, it's encouraging to use up to 4 tablespoons of olive oil every day. So you do have some room to use that olive oil in your cooking.
Great. And there's a question about avocado oil. Is it good for cooking? And definitely it is a good source of something called monounsaturated oil or fat, which is similar to what the olive oil has. And that has been shown in research to reduce our cholesterol levels. Specifically our LDL cholesterol. So definitely can be included, but most of the research on heart healthy eating actually is linked to consuming olive oil. And that's why that Mediterranean eating pattern emphasizes olive oil. And we do talk about olive oil in our presentation today, as well as next week. So if you can have, you know, the majority of your oil use being olive oil, then you can use other monounsaturated oils like avocado oil in addition, you know, to flavor your foods differently. So you could try that.
Okay, question here. Do you think eggplant and tomatoes are detrimental to people with arthritis? And this is, I think, a very common myth that if you do suffer from arthritis, that you should be avoiding what they call the nightshade vegetables. That might include things like eggplant and tomatoes and peppers. When we look at the research, it actually doesn't support that these foods would cause any extra inflammation or pain in people living with arthritis. But that being said, I think everyone is different, and there might be foods that trigger symptoms in one person that might not trigger them in another person. So I think you have to go with what your triggers are. But generally, the research hasn't shown that eggplant or tomatoes are something that should be avoided if you do live with arthritis.
Great. And it is 1:45 now, so I'll end it here, but there is a question about where to find the answers to the questions. So there are quite a bit more questions here, which is fabulous. Thank you for asking them. And we'll be sure to write answers for all of them. You can link back to our website, so cardiaccollege.ca, and then just where you came in to log into the webinar today, you would go back to that same button, and it will say view upcoming sessions or view past sessions. So you can click the past sessions, and then you can find the topic today, which is heart healthy ways of eating, and there'll be a blue button that will appear hopefully in the next 48 hours that has questions and answers. So I would encourage you to click there, and it will be a PDF document about all the answers to these questions. And then, as I said, another plug for next week, we do have another heart healthy eating session planned, which will hopefully answer some more of your questions.
Yeah, and then just even thinking farther ahead, the week after that, we plan on just doing an open Q&A session. So if you do have any questions that we haven't had a chance to answer yet, we'd love to answer them during that session as well. And
tomorrow there is a webinar about resistance training at home. So stay tuned for that. And if you can attend that one next week, and if not, we'll see you again or talk to you again next week.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.